Hey, it's Rod Yates. Welcome to another episode of Humans of Music, a Jaxsta podcast. Each episode I talk to a music creator or industry professional about their life and career, the ups and downs of their journey and the lessons they've learned. And my special guest today is New Zealand singer-songwriter Marlon Williams. Marlon's voice has been turning heads ever since he was a teen singing in the church choir. It was enough to convince Bradley Cooper to cast him in A Star Is Born, in which his character performed a beautiful version of Roy Orbison's Pretty Woman alongside Brandi Carlile. He continues to act to this day, but it's music for which Marlon is perhaps best known. He was raised in the small New Zealand town of Littleton and cut his teeth in New Zealand before relocating to Australia, after which he toured the world on the back of his 2015 self-titled debut album and its follow-up, Make Way for Love. He now lives back in New Zealand, which is where he was when we caught up in late July. And while we talk about his entire life and career in this interview, we started by talking about Marlon's new album, My Boy. The album, it feels like it's got a little bit more of a lightness to it than Make Way for Love, and certainly a desire perhaps to push the boundaries a little bit of what people would expect from you. Were they two goals with this record?
Yeah. I think definitely a practical goal for me after making a quote-unquote breakup record and Make Way for Love was, I just was like, well, I can't, just gallivant around the world being this sad, singing these sad songs again. I've got to find some way of just sort of keeping myself sort of peppy. And yeah, I think just for whatever I was listening to at the time, going into the writing and recording of this record, it was made for a good sort of canvas to just paint a little bit more light fun onto than Make Way for Love was. Which it's I think it's nice to. I'll probably go back to making an extremely dark record next time. I think it's good to flip-flop around.
You mentioned that you couldn't go around the world singing these sad songs forever. When you do that, did it actually start to take a toll on you mentally?
I think so. I think, I've always sort of thought this about when you make work, you are, especially the way we have to promote it and sort of send the signal out these days is that I think there's always the risk of not being able to see the wood for the trees sometimes and sort of aligning yourself with your past work, and sort of identifying yourself with it, which I think, it's just every artist has got to sort of struggle to shake themselves off of themselves and sort of be in the game of self-contradiction, I think, or else
right.
you end up sort of getting stuck.
Yeah, so it's almost like this is a reaction to Make Way for Love. Would that be fair to say?
I think in some ways, it still has a lot of sort of the same sort of keystones of darkness sort of listed through it, but just the colour scheme I used is definitely a lot brighter. It's a lot more summery.
And was that good? Did that feel good to you? Did that feel good to explore?
Yeah, it did. It felt, it didn't always feel comfortable. It, I sort of came up either singing Catholic masses or like whiskey-soaked, heart-worn honky-tonk music. So I'm used to wallowing, but like we said, it's good to contradict yourself and push against your natural inclinations a lot of the time. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd seen you say that Make Way for Love was quite a self-cannibalizing record, was one of the terms that you used. How would you regard this record?
Well, I'd say it's certainly not that. I felt a lot more space from a lot of the songs. There are a couple of the tunes that were in that same mode, but otherwise, it was sort of a lot of these songs came from sort of thinking about sort of general phenomena and issues in the world, and like thinking of Nina as a song about a TV show character from a TV show called The Americans. So there's I guess there's some sort of level of distance into this record that wasn't there in the last one.
Okay. And masculinity as well seems to be something that you explore throughout the record. I think you've said male shapes are quite important to this record. What does that mean?
Well, I'm not sure really. I mean, it's sort of, I only sort of made that observation in hindsight. I didn't intend to write these sort of little love letters to older brothers kind of songs, but I just sort of, when I looked at the landscape after it all was said and done, I just that was definitely an emergent theme, was this idea of of being a loyal follower along some sort of behind some sort of a strong male figure. And I don't know. I guess I'm an only child, but there have been a lot of these sort of characters in my life, and I think I've always just sort of adopted older brothers in this world. And I guess there's a lot of these songs are sort of dedicated to that sort of dynamic and energy.
And is that because you were an only child, do you think, that you looked for older male figures that could be brotherly?
I think so, yeah. It's hard to it's pretty deep stuff and deeply psychological, but I think I just, I always sort of oscillated as a child from wanting siblings and not. And I think, this is me acknowledging that it was something that I missed, and that that I've spent a life recreating through, playing in bands with dudes. And I don't know, I guess there's not too much depth to read into it other than that sort of, the sort of joy of that dynamic.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you weren't perhaps quite conscious of it when you were writing it. When you had that revelation, or when you realized that, was it a revelation?
In a sense, I think it's sort of like a Rorschach's test, or whatever you call it, the making music, where you sort of, you can read it a few different ways. But I think, the fact that that's where I went to, and that was one of the main themes I drew from it, clearly was something that was somewhere in my brain and needed some sort of voice. But I think that's one of the joys about songwriting and creating is, this sort of world it creates to self-reflect on.
The song My Boy, I believe the guitar technique, is that called the Maori strum?
Yeah, it's some version of it. There's a lot of different, there's like the boom chicka, and then there's a whole bunch of different varieties of the Maori strum, but that's one particular version of it that I've been doing for a while. And I think, that song, of all the songs, really wrote itself the most naturally and came out very easy. And I think it's the lightness of that strum and the sort of softness of the vocal melody, and it just sort of all lent itself to a very easy writing process. And of course, the songs that write themselves the most easily are always your favorites, because they're just, the least difficult labor.
Sure. I think I'd read you talk about when you were touring Make Way for Love, you became obsessed with wanting to write using the Maori strum. Why do you think?
It had been floating around for a while, and it's sort of there it's sort of there in the song Make Way for Love actually too. But I think, it was whenever I'd pick up a guitar, we all have some sort of picking pattern or strumming pattern we go for when we pick up a guitar as a default, and that really became the default. And so I sort of had to exercise the demon and find a spot to put it. And that song was just came out very easy.
Okay, because you have Maori heritage in your family.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, on both sides. So it's but it's I guess in the last few years I've been getting back into studying the language and reading more into the history and sort of immersing myself in that world a lot more. So I think there'll be more and more of that coming out in my writing.
Yeah. How central has it been to you in the past in terms of informing who you are?
It's on and off. I've sort of been more or less involved with Te Ao Māori, the Māori world, throughout my whole life. When I moved to Australia and lived in Melbourne for a few years, it was, it's sort of, it didn't impose itself or bring itself to my world in such a obviously explicit way. You really got to sort of do the work when you're over there and when you're overseas, and to try and keep the home fire burning. But I think, it's it's always been there in the way I sing and in the way I think, I'm sure, but now that I'm back home more often and I live back here, it's just something I want to explore more and more, and just sort of synchronize with my being, and and have as part of my personality, I guess.
Yeah. Does it? I guess when you do that, do you feel more whole? Is that too corny a way of saying that?
I'm always, I don't know, I'm sort of allergic to ideas of sort of identity through that sort of belonging. I sort of philosophically very skeptical of identity.
Right.
But which is sort of runs into trouble because so much of the Māori world is based around whakapapa and your heritage, your genealogy. So there's a lot of contradictions and a lot of sort of rough patches to navigate there. But it does make me feel connected in some way to the land, and to and I feel like I'm within some continuum in some way.
Because I know there are a couple of songs on the record, "Don't Go Back" and "Easy Does It," to name two, where you do sort of incorporate elements of and forgive my pronunciation, is it Te Reo Maori? Maori?
Yeah, Te Reo Māori, yeah.
I mean, because I'd also read that I think that you were at one point planning an entire album in that language. Is that still the case?
That's at some point down the line that'll be happening. Yeah.
Okay.
It's something I'm just as I'm trying to get my head around the language and how to write, how I'd go about writing in that world. But that's definitely on the cards.
Is it something that you have to clear? Like, are there elders, or is there any sort of cultural things that you have to?
There's certainly there are ways you can go about it. There are what we call tikanga, which is the right way to do things. And it's Māori is a marginalised language and a marginalised culture, and therefore there is a level of protectiveness and preciousness and exactness that sort of is an implied responsibility when you go into doing this thing. And I also want to be able to innovate at the same time and to and also there's a part of me that's very open to my own flaws as a learner, as someone who's learning the language. I don't feel completely against the idea of writing naively and writing at some sort of juncture between the two worlds. I think there's value in every step of the learning process, and I think the more transparent and public we can make, and sort of human we can make the process of because I'm Māori and I have a vague grasp of the language, but for a lot of Māori have a little to no knowledge of their own language. So I think having the humility and of flawed progress being out in the open is maybe it has some worth in and of itself.
Absolutely, and it's important. It's important to keep that language from dying.
I mean, it's it's an official language of the country, and so many New Zealanders don't speak a second language, and it's been medically and scientifically proven that just the act of learning a second language, whatever it is does wonderful things for the brain. It alters the neuroplasticity of the brain. So before you even get to whether all New Zealanders should know Māori as some sort of responsibility as a treaty partner or whatever, just look at the neurophysiology of it. It's a great thing to do. And so there's no reason for us all not to be learning Māori, I don't think.
Absolutely. What was it like approaching this record because obviously we'd had the pandemic, and I know you released the Plastic Bouquet album with Casey and Clayton in 2020, but never really got to tour that. And obviously, like the rest of the world, had to stay at home. But what was it like then approaching My Boy without having the exhaustion of 2 years on the road prior to that? Did it make a difference?
It did. In a lot of ways, it was, it was easier. I had a lot more time to think about it and to do the writing and to sort of do a session in the studio with Tom Healy, the producer, and then go away, come back with some new ideas. But, at the same time, having more time doesn't necessarily bring about better results. And so, it just brings a whole new set of challenges of sort of possibility and having to navigate more time and more freedom in a lot of ways is harder. So I did a lot of second guessing and a lot of sort of chasing my own tail, and went through all of that in a way that I've never been afforded before. So it's great just going about it in all these different ways and learning what the pitfalls and joys of all those different ways of doing it are.
Yeah. Was there a song on there which particularly challenged you, which the amount of time you had to write it just became a real albatross?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple that didn't make it for that reason. They just sort of burnt themselves out and sort of, it's just sort of, I ended up throwing them against the wall and not picking them back up again. And then, I mean, weirdly, a song like River Rival, that started off as I was sort of just as a very sort of, bleary-eyed little Nick Drake acoustic number, and then it sort of started going into some sort of proggy, like Noi world or something, and then started going more and more that way, and then I tried to marry the two worlds, and then I don't know, and then I tried to write a B section, and I was like, oh no, I doesn't want it. I just want to like keep it simple, and it turns into an absolute sort of drama playing out in your own head, where you go back and forth and get confused, and then you get tired and go, oh fuck it, I'll just go back to whatever. Yeah.
What about with some of the characters that are on the record? Because I think I've read about you talking about how your acting work has helped you with presenting characters in your songs. Has that been the case with this record? And if so, I mean, how has it helped you? Is there an example on the record where your work on movies and TV has helped you present characters?
Yeah. Well, it goes back to what we were talking about before with the having a little bit of distance from some of these songs and sort of having maybe a sort of more measured outside look at them. I think one thing that I've learned from the acting world is that it's just, you just spend so much time observing. Even when you're within the scene, you're watching the world around you is the way into sort of the character's world. And Miranda Harcourt, who's sort of a acting mentor for me at the moment, she has these incredible ways of thinking about it, but she knows my background as a musician, and she said, you're used to sort of representing the universe as a musician and as a songwriter, but as an actor, you just watch the world act around you. So I think there's something of the passivity of being an actor. I know it sounds sort of counterintuitive, but the passivity of watching the world in which the characters inhabit has fed back into the writing in a way that's given me a bit of distance and a bit of, especially after the sort of intense introspection of Make Way for Love. It's sort of allowing me to, just sort of play around with character more and sort of be on the outside a little.
Is script writing something you could see yourself going into?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I like writing prose, and I like writing poetry, and I'm very sort of manic with what I want to do from day to day. So who knows? I could have one too many coffees one morning and have the first draft of a script by lunchtime. Who knows?
Lunch, exactly. What was the first film set that you walked onto? Was it The Beautiful Lie back in 2015?
It was actually, I think it was that same year, but a little earlier on, I did a movie in New Zealand called The Rehearsal, which was a sort of a small production, but really great little Kiwi film about young actors. And so it was that, and then The Beautiful Lie followed soon afterwards. But I think it was a bit of a mind-blowing thing. I was sort of, at that stage, I was sort of just gotten into the swing of what it was meant to be in the music studio, and to sort of be there with the band and the producer, and that be a whole creative world wherein everything is contained and everything comes out of that. But I think the first thing that shocked me about being on a film set was just how many cooks there are in the kitchen. It's just
right.
It made me anxious thinking about the director's creative control and the screenwriter, how they could possibly see their vision through all the way, and I sort of have more of this overview of how that all works now, and that you just sort of the trusting in the sort of the creative whole is part of the process now. But I remember that being a bit of a shock to me. Yeah.
Were you still processing that when you came to do A Star Is Born? I mean, that's no longer an independent New Zealand film. That's about as big as it gets.
Well, that was, I mean, it was such another universe that it sort of, I don't know, I don't even know how, it was so surreal that it just, it didn't sort of map onto any sort of other experience I'd had. You know, that's just like, yeah, La La Land stuff. So that was its own experience.
A good experience? Like, do you have any particular memories which stand out for you? Because the scene that you're in with Brandi Carlile is such a beautiful scene.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it was just one of those sort of Hollywood fairy tale moments, you know, where we're playing a show at the Troubadour in Hollywood, and then Bradley Cooper comes along and emails me saying he's written a scene for a movie that he's making that he wants me to be in, and from then on it was just from then to the premiere, it was just a bizarre experience of just hanging around with all these larger than life characters. But one of my favorite memories was, because Bradley Cooper was, aside from being the director and the screenwriter and the lead and the music producer, I mean, yeah, he was the music producer too. On top of all of that, he learned how to play the guitar and has an incredible voice. But he came into the studio when I was laying down that song "Pretty Woman" in the studio, and he had such an actor's way of music producing me. He's like, who's an actress you really love? Like when I was in the studio, I was like, I've always had a bit of a thing for Eva Green. So he like pulls up this photo of Eva Green and he's like, sing to her. And so it's just like, that's not normally how we do it in the studio. We don't like pull up photos of like, I felt like some teenager with like a poster on my wall and just like I was singing to her. But there was just bizarre experiences like that really, I don't know, it was a lot of fun for sure.
Did you have a mentor, or did you have anyone that could help you in that, navigate that world?
I've had them, over the course of different. That film was sort of straightforward for me in a way, and that it's I was just playing myself. I come in and I sing Roy Orbison, which is something I've been doing since high school. So there wasn't a lot of much of a reach for me there, but
sure.
Definitely, like I say, I've had Miranda Harcourt as an acting coach, and certainly I've really relied on both fellow cast members and the directors and other people to hold my hand through a lot of that stuff, because it's some of it's intuitive and some of it's not. Some of it needs a bit of explaining before you can get your head around it.
Yeah, you mentioned high school there and singing Roy Orbison a little bit earlier, and I kind of wanted to go back to your upbringing in Littleton, which a pretty small place outside Christchurch, around about 3,000 people or so.
Yeah, it's pretty tiny.
What was it like to grow up there? For people who've never been to Littleton, how would you describe it?
Well, Christchurch is an extremely flat city. You get off the plane at the airport, and we've got on one side out to the west, you've got the Southern Alps that sort of stand as this way across the plains that stand as a sort of barrier against the weather, but then to the east, you've got Banks Peninsula, which is a sort of beautiful, rocky, mountainous peninsula, and you drive through the flatness of Christchurch and get to the tunnel, the Littleton Road Tunnel, and it takes about 3 minutes to get through the tunnel, and then you come out and you're sort of in a natural amphitheatre, which is Littleton, and it's had a sort of a very long and storied history, first of of Māori occupation, and then it was sort of where the first 4 ships of Canterbury landed in the early 1800s, and it's been a blue collar port for most of its existence, and it's now but it also had an incredible sort of art scene, both visual arts and music, for a few decades now, and it's sort of, obviously we had the earthquakes in 2011, which sort of decimated the main street in terms of a lot of the beautiful buildings and venues, but it's sort of now in that sort of stage of gentrification where we're sort of just trying to battle against the things getting too comfortable there and keeping the sort of spirit of the port alive. And it's always a balancing act, but was an incredible place to grow up. It was I went to school there, and there was a lot of had that that sort of freedom that's specific to small towns, and I think I hope is still there for children growing up in small towns, but felt like it's sort of another world now. And I was always sort of able to just sort of roam the streets, knowing that it's sort of being hugged by the hills, and that you can't really escape or go too far as a child without eventually ending up back at home. Yeah.
Right. I think I'd seen you refer to your childhood as eccentric. What did you mean by that?
Well, yeah, I moved around a fair bit, and I think it was just probably the story of most children in Littleton at the time. You're either the child of port workers or artists or someone working in hospo or something. So, I think we just sort of, just made for a sort of good smorgasbord of personalities in that place. And, it's sort of definitely, both within my family and within the wider community, there was a lot of room to just sort of explore and find novel ways of thinking about the world and enjoying it.
That's imprinted on you, that idea, those novel ways of thinking about the world. That was a really important element of bringing you up and shaping who you are.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I've never felt any of the sort of conventional pressures from my parents or from some sort of I've always just felt like a free thinker in the most general sense. Just sort of following my nose and finding sideways into normal problems. And I think that's I think it's a privilege to have had that sort of upbringing, and it certainly keeps my life interesting, and I don't know, it makes things fun.
We'll be back with more from Marlon after this short break. Welcome back to Humans of Music and my interview with Marlon Williams. Musically, your Nan's record collection seemed to be quite important. Is that where you discovered the Beatles and the Seekers?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's the Seekers was I remember finding my Nana's Seekers record, and I think I'll Never Find Another You is still maybe my top 5 songs ever written. It's such an incredible song, and from that into the Beatles, and it was always definitely across my family, everyone listened to that stuff, so it really became my bread and butter from an early age.
And where else do you find music? Because I know your dad had been involved in music as a punk singer in the Bone Shakers, I think it was the name of the band. Was there a lot of music in the house?
Yeah, there always. I mean, my mother's a painter and would always listen to classical music very loud in the middle of the night while she's painting, and there was always a lot going on there. And then we'd always learn the Maori songs for the next sort of tribal meeting that was happening. So there's always that part of it. And then Dad's extremely musical and has always had a guitar around, and we're always sort of writing little songs together, and just sort of, it was definitely all around me all the time.
So you would write songs with your dad?
Yeah, just sort of little exercises of just feeling it out and getting excited about a certain artist's way of writing or some new song, and then either learning that or trying to write some, something in the style of. So it was very, very organic.
Yeah. What age were you when that sort of started to happen, when you showed that level of interest?
Well, when I was really young, I wanted to be a trumpet player. When I was about 5 or 6,
right?
But I couldn't until my teeth came through. So I had to. I tried to play the violin, and I think I snapped the bow in my first lesson somehow. So that was gone. And then, but I think it was really when I joined the choir when I was about 9, and then from there started. I think just started like thinking about it would be great to be able to play the guitar and accompany myself, and be able to just do it all in some way. And so I think I remember learning Blowing in the Wind or whatever, and then it sort of all opened up from there. And Dad could play with a guitar, and so we just sort of yeah, we just started learning a lot of songs and doing a lot of singing most nights.
Yeah. And so joining the choir, you obviously singing obviously resonated with you quite young for you to gravitate towards that. Did you feel an immediate connection with singing?
Yeah, I think it was just it wasn't. It's hard to find a way to communicate properly as a child. I think a lot of kids, well, obviously all kids are learning how to be how to be agents in the world and how to talk to other people. And I think I just felt this massive relief the first time I went to choir that I was able to communicate to other people in a natural language. So it was a real eye-opening moment in a sort of way, a moment that brought me into tow with the rest of the world in a way, I think.
Did it teach you techniques that you still use today?
I think there's something fundamental about that you learn about humanity when you get involved in group singing of any kind, whether it's in a choir or in like Māori kapahaka groups or whatever it is. There's some sort of some sort of ancient sense of community that is implicit in that stuff that is really hard to get anywhere else. I think it should be part of every child's sort of upbringing to know what it's like to be part of that whole and to work out. Yeah, it's just such a sort of good metaphor for having to navigate other people in life too. And so yeah, I think it's crucial.
Yeah. And I mean, it's something that you kept doing, isn't it? Even in high school, I think. Was it the Christchurch Cathedral Choir that you joined?
Yeah. I mean, it's something I miss every day almost is singing in that choir. I had an incredible choir master named Don Whelan, who was also my high school music teacher, which is how I ended up in that choir. And he's an extremely eccentric teacher who's, certainly didn't do things by the book all the time, but he was just, he's definitely very sort of manic in his love for all this music, and he'd always just be at the whims of where he was the next week. But he'd come into choir practice on a Wednesday with a sort of 16-part avant-garde, like atonal mass by Frank Martong, and you'd sort of sight read it on the Wednesday and have to basically sing it again at mass on Sunday, and there'd be maybe like one person for every part. Like at some point, if you're writing a mass of that size, then it's absolute chaos. But you sort of just hold on for dear life, and it does wonders for your sense of your ability to sort of sight read and your sort of bravery when in performance and in live performance. Yeah.
Do you think that armed you when you started to actually perform yourself, whether in a band or as a solo artist? Did that arm you, those experiences?
Yeah, I think I really inherited a lot of his recklessness and his confidence and sort of brashness in terms of how I like to structure my live shows. And yeah, I think there's just something in the mania of half-cut ideas and just trying to get things over the line that I really enjoy and find a lot of pleasure in bringing to my own sets.
Right. How was it being a high school kid and singing in a choir such as that? How was that received by your peers? Because I understand the school you went to, I think, produced quite a lot of All Blacks. So there's a very sport kind of rugby heritage there. But to be an artistic child and to enjoy singing in a choir, did that set you apart from your peers?
Yeah, I was lucky enough in that my particular school year had a lot of who went on to be great people in the arts in New Zealand. So I think I just lucked out in terms of having a really solid peer group there. But also, I sort of had some tangential relationships to the rugby world because I was in the Māori class, so I sort of could cut things both ways, and I'm definitely a bit of a diplomat, so I was able to sort of wrangle some sort of position of relative safety within the confines of a sporting school.
Nice. So at what point do you start writing songs seriously? When do you start thinking, I'd like to actually do this on another level and in a different realm, not choir singing anymore, but actually popular music, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, well, I had a band in high school called The Unfaithful Ways, and it was around the time that I joined the choir, actually. I also really, at the same time, had sort of become infatuated by way of sort of Graham Parsons and people like that. I'd become infatuated with Hank Williams and George Jones and all of these, this honky-tonk tradition, and more on into the bluegrass world of, Bill Monroe and Ralph Stanley and people like that. And so, and then I guess, at that time I would have been 15 or so, and so the sort of juices of a teenage angst and the desire to do something original sort of came through that lens. I was listening to country music, and so I started writing country songs. And so, so that was with that band, The Unfaithful Ways, and we, coming out of high school, we had an EP of songs and of originals, and we went and recorded those, and then, spent the next couple of years sort of touring around New Zealand and recording an album with them, and just sort of trying to earn some stripes as a young country band, and mid 2000s New Zealand.
And was it? What do you remember the first tour?
Nah, I don't even. Like, I remember going to Auckland for the first time, and just the novelty of just getting off the plane with your guitar and your country hat, and just the excitement of being a band on tour. And it's funny now. I haven't thought about it for a long time, but it all felt so new. And so loading into a venue and sound checking, and it was just like magic. It felt like it was all happening for me, and it's nice to think back on that. But there's not many sound checks that I enjoy loading into now, but there was once upon a time when that was an exciting thing to do.
Did you learn a lot?
Yeah. It's pretty much since high school. I did a couple of years of study at uni, but other than that, I've pretty much been touring, whether within New Zealand and in Australia with The Unfaithful Ways and with Delaney Davidson, who I did a lot of collaborating with, and then further afield, it's been a good sort of more than a decade of touring now, which is crazy to think, but I must have learned something in that time. And I've certainly one thing I've learned is that I like being at home now, and it's taught me to appreciate the stillness of home.
How did you learn to cope with, particularly as your solo career started to take off, and you were touring the world and quite often on big stages and also high pressure situations, whether it be TV shows like Conan or, how did you learn to? Did you have to develop certain mechanisms to be able to do that day in, day out?
I try not to think of things too much in the grand. When you're on the road and you're doing it, like doing Conan and doing all these shows, that they all happen within the sort of flow of a tour anyway. So I try to try and look at it one step at a time, and just as another show, really. I find that's the easiest way not to start panicking about that kind of stuff.
Right.
But obviously there's you're navigating different cultures to a certain degree, and there's an American audience is different to an English one, is different to an Australian one, which is slightly different to a New Zealand one. So there's all these sort of lessons you pick up on the way that are come out in the way you work, and in the way you present things. But I think I just try not to look, I try and bury my head in the sand somewhat in terms of not getting overwhelmed by the lights of Hollywood. Sure. Or whatever, and just sort of going back to the fundamentals of what I want to get across in the performance, and just sort of resigning the rest of it to fate.
Sure. In those early days, particularly of touring somewhere like America, did you have the whole in a van, overnight drive, 3 a.m. truck stop, wash there, get back in the van, drive? Did you have those experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm still, still having them. The States is it's a hard place to tour in, and touring in a tour bus is expensive, and so we're still sort of doing those 3 a.m. Truck stop things, and it's a hustle out there, and it's a little easier in New Zealand and Australia, but yeah, it feels like a grind a lot of the time, and you've got to have good people around you who you enjoy being around and who don't mind, the harsh realities of some of the touring of the touring life. Otherwise, you quickly find out that you aren't cut out for it, or you don't want to have to deal with that, and which is fine too. But yeah, it's not a walk in the park.
No. Are there times where you haven't felt cut out for it, where you've thought, I've just not into this right now?
Yeah, I mean, you learn the hard way where your limits are a lot of the time, and a tour can look one way when you're planning it, and then you get halfway through it, and inevitably things go wrong and things change, and you sort of exhaust yourself in various ways, and all of a sudden you realize that it was a fool's errand to try and do so much in certain times, but it's hopefully there's a general sort of curve of learning going on where it's where I'm getting older and wiser and learning some of my parameters. But I'm constantly being made humble by by the rigors of the road, for sure.
You mentioned earlier, obviously, the Christchurch earthquake. And I've seen you say that earthquake in 2011 was one of the most important events in your life. Why so?
I think, I was Littleton at that time, and Christchurch was an incredible place to be making music. There was a really great sort of country roots scene going on that I was a big part of, and really was relishing being able to play in different bars every weekend, and in such a small town. It felt like I don't know, it just felt like a really alive and happening place to be, even at that age when a lot of people want to go and explore. There was so much for me to learn, and so many people for me to learn from, and places to play, so many venues to play. It was just a really great time. And then the earthquake hit just when we were felt like we were peaking in some way. And it just completely shifted. Yeah, obviously just all the venues went down, the nightlife got squashed. But at the same time, there was some sort of need for music in a way that I'd never, some sort of community need for especially for folk music. It was it all was playing into what we were doing as a scene. It was all of a sudden we had this place to go to, and this sort of role to fill as a way of like stitching and keeping the community stitched together. We put on sort of gigs in public parks, and we'd throw house parties, and we'd there was a real just sense of folk community, and it was just I think that's just it's one of those sort of cataclysmic events that out of need and necessity pushes people together and makes wonderful things happen. And I wouldn't change it for the world, despite what a horrible thing it was, and we've lost a lot from it, and people lost loved ones, but it meant that we all joined together in a really beautiful way.
And did it, as much as it was providing solace for other people, was it also providing solace for you?
Yeah, well, suddenly I had a job, and it felt more than just sort of playing around and writing songs for the sake of it. It was there was a cause, and there was some sort of social function to fulfill. So, and that made me, that's made me feel needed and sort of practical in a way that I'd never really felt before. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, did that make it hard? Because you moved to Australia, a couple of years after that?
Yeah, a couple of years after. Yeah.
Did that make it harder to leave?
Yeah, definitely. It was no mean thing, and I had this had a big farewell party, and it was the small town thing of everyone sort of waving you off at the tunnel and saying, well, you come on back at some point, so, but, I moved there with my girlfriend at the time, and sort of under the promise of working with my manager, Alistair, who I still work with now, and, he sort of said, come over here and let's just make a go of things. And So I just sort of, traded in Littleton for Melbourne and was, found myself playing six nights a week in various suburbs of Melbourne for the next wee while, and sort of just taking the plunge as the young man gone to seek out his fortunes.
How did that feel? That must have been terribly exciting.
Yeah, it really was. Melbourne was such a cosmopolitan place, all the food, and I've discovered, I remember my first bowl of Vietnamese pho, and just I've now I now eat about at least a bowl of that a week, or I sort of start decomposing. Just all these whole new worlds that were, and of course the pub scene of being able to go and like every pub's got music in it. That's something that Australia's got. There were so many similarities to home, but all these different things that was so much more exciting, like the pub music scene and all the food, and just I don't know. There was a lot there to for me to get excited about.
Was there homesickness as well that you had to deal with?
Yeah, that was definitely the first taste of what it was like to be away for any given long period of time, and but at the same time I was sort of at that age where it was, I think that homesickness starts to really creep back in your later 20s or in your early 30s, if and I think I was at that stage. There was enough novelty and freshness to not worry too much and not get too homesick.
Right. So when did you sense that it was starting to happen for you? What was the first sign that things were taking off?
Well, I think I gradually started to play slightly less open mic nights, and went down to maybe one or two a week instead of having to do it every night. We were starting to play some more interesting and nuanced shows, and and I guess I don't know. I just sort of within my little Melbourne world, there was. There were more people coming along to the shows, and I sort of was starting to really sort of develop a idea of what it is to tailor a show and to tailor a set, as opposed to being some sort of a fly-by-night sort of guerrilla musician, and it's sort of I guess the sort of the construct of myself as an artist sort of began emerging out of that, and it had more room and more people. Yeah, there's more people paying attention. So I guess that was the first sort of sign of it shifting.
Sure. Was it when you mentioned open mic nights, that hadn't even occurred to me that, of course, you went presumably from being a big fish in a relatively little pond to a little fish in this entirely new city that you'd never really lived in before. How did you deal with that? Was it just the case of just staying busy, just playing 6 shows a week? Sorry.
Exactly, yeah. Just playing as much as I can, and I don't mind being the little fish in the big pond. It's it gives you something to strive for, and it's I don't know. I think I really relished the challenge, and I just was enjoying playing so much that having the opportunity to go out there that often was all I really needed.
Right.
And I was lucky in that audiences were responding, and there's something really satisfying about feeling that natural organic growth that's before record labels and before social media and all that stuff. It's just the word of mouth sort of local scene thing that's really in a way is just nothing beats that, I don't think.
Yeah. When was the first time your parents were able to see you perform in front of a big crowd in Australia? Was there a moment where they could see that you were on your way?
Yeah, it was probably when I came back, and I sort of started making a little bit of headway over in Melbourne. And I remember I played at the TED Talks and at the Sydney Opera House. It must have been 2014 or so. And then I came home and the next night played at my local bar, the Wonder Bar in Littleton. And I think there was some sort of sense of, like, just the sort of the glamour sort of snapshot of going from the Opera House to the Wonder Bar was like this sort of byline that stuck, and everyone back in Littleton was like, oh, I see, it's the Opera House. So I think that's probably as pivotal moment as any. that really spoke to things sort of shifting gears.
Yeah. So when you look now, obviously with My Boy coming out shortly and the world opening up again, so presumably you have a lengthy tour stretching out ahead of you. After the years of not being able to travel, how does it feel? What's the emotion knowing that you will spend the next 12 to 18 months touring?
There's a lot going. There's a lot there. There's caution. There's hesitance to remind myself to adapt in whatever ways I need to. Whatever that was difficult about touring, that bit of time staying still has given me the hindsight or sort of perspicacity to make little changes, little hacks. But, and then generally it's just excitement. Yeah, it's the excitement to be back out there, to be playing with my band again, with the Arabenders, who are, we haven't played together for years and years. So just to see those guys and to have that fraternity there back rolling around the world will be just beautiful in and of itself. And yeah, and then just, I don't know, it's having just done this tour with Lord, it was just so refreshing and like waking up from a coma to be in front of all these people again. And yeah, I know it'll be good for me and good for the band and hopefully good for the audiences to just to sort of have some sort of semblance of normality.
Nice
going on again.
Yeah. Last thing, Marlon, Jaxsta is all about giving credit where credit is due. Are there people you'd give credit to for helping you get where you are today?
Well, I mean, it all started with my parents for sure. Just that freedom to be to explore ideas and to not be a banker and or whatever, and it started there, and the curiosity for the world around me, and then so many musicians in Littleton and the community I had growing up, who further reinforced that, and teachers like Don Whelan. It takes a few good teachers at high school or a few bad ones to make or break an experience, a high school experience. So that, and then Alistair, my manager, has sort of really pushed me and to sort of reach into places I wouldn't have bothered to reach into, and sort of he's made my career be something that I wouldn't have been able to do by myself. And then just to all everyone who writes amazing songs, and every day I wake up and there's someone's put out a new incredible track, and it's just enjoying the other people's creations and letting them feed into what I'm doing and what I do next. It's an endless cycle, and it's a wonderful thing to be to feel yourself be part of.
Yeah, nice one. Marlon, thanks so much for taking all the time to chat. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been nice. Thanks very much for having me, Rod.
And that's it for another episode of Humans of Music. A big thanks to Marlon for his time, and thank you for listening. Just a reminder that Marlon's latest album, My Boy, is released on September the 9th. If you have any feedback on the show or suggestions on who you'd like me to talk to, or even if you just want to say hello, please drop me a line at humansofmusic@jaxsta.com. That's humansofmusic, one word, at Jaxsta, JAXSTA.com. This episode was mixed by Lachlan Mitchell from Parliament Studios in Annandale, and the incidental music and theme song were written and performed by Sam Lockwood. Please remember to subscribe to the Humans of Music podcast so you never miss an episode, or even better, share it amongst your friends and rate and review it. And remember, next time you need to know who wrote a song, who produced a song, who engineered it, who played on it, who sang on it, who did anything on it, head to jaxsta.com for all your official music credit information. Until the next episode of Humans of Music, I'm Rod Yates. Thanks for listening.